The 2024 NBA offseason has been chaotic.
Klay Thompson has agreed to a 3-year, $50 million contract with the Dallas Mavericks.
Paul George is heading to the 76ers.
The Knicks were determined to acquire Mikal Bridges.
Agent Buddy Hield will be playing with the Warriors next season.
Isaiah Hartenstein is now a member of the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Klay Thompson and Paul George both did not return to their teams, not because they didn't want to, but because of one rule change. And in fact, it's completely reshaped the NBA as we know it. When this rule was announced, it was meant to target the Warriors and Clippers. I guess it did.
Boy, ain't no way, boy.
It's the one big thing we need to talk about this week. So strap in to hear all the trades and roster moves that have transformed the NBA. What is up, dudes, that's ballers players? It's your boy MJ. Teams are faced with a choice, whether to spend money and contend or strategically avoid so they can be flexible. And tanking. We're not going to talk about that. Before free agency even started, the offseason began with drama. The Lakers failed to get another piece that they wanted. DeJounte Murray got traded to the Pelicans, but they're looking to trade Ingram, so to be continued. The Knicks trade Bojan Bogdanovic and their entire future. 5 first-round picks to get Mikal Bridges, adding another member of the 2015 Villanova team. Their goal is to beat teams with the power of friendship.
I like this. I like this. I like.
They then re-signed OG. The Knicks are spending to win, but still couldn't keep Hartenstein, who went to the Thunder with cap space. But other teams look like they got infinite money. But before we get to the Clippers and Warriors, who both didn't offer their stars the contracts they were looking for, the Celtics quietly signed Jason Tatum to the biggest contract in NBA history. 5 years, $314 million.
We did it!
And re-signed Derek White a 4-year, $125.9 million contract. Their core contracts look like this. But how can the Celtics throw this much money at the players? Because the rules allow you to. In the older days, the biggest market teams would just have the most money to go after players. Until 1984, when they introduced the salary cap. The NBA has a soft cap and hard cap. You can go beyond the soft cap for a number of reasons, like re-signing your own player using their bird rights, or even in a trade, taking back more money. You can't sign a new player if you're over the soft cap, but sign trade works like Klay Thompson to the Mavericks, since the Mavs were over the salary cap. Once you get to a threshold, there's luxury tax, meaning for every dollar over this amount, teams are paying more money, all depending on the tax bracket. Repeat offenders pay more per dollar over the cap. The Pelicans are just one of 2 teams to never pay the luxury tax. It's why they let Valanciunas and Najee Marshall walk, being a little more flexible while contending, but mid. Valanciunas also didn't go to Lakers and signed a 3-year, $30 million deal with the Wizards. Why are you taking a pay cut to play with the Wizards? So big spenders pay hella taxes, but it works out if you're winning. The Warriors paid $176 million in taxes on top of a league-high $205.57 million payroll.
Damn.
The taxes add up, but this is all standard. And it's why the Warriors were hesitant on offering Klay more money for the first time in a while. They felt that the roster was not winning enough, not to justify paying ridiculous amounts in taxes. In fact, Joe Lacob, the Warriors owner, said the plan is to avoid luxury tax entirely. So in short, the Warriors didn't believe Klay and Chris Paul were worth the tax hit, which is why they waived CP3, who ended up an unrestricted free agent, and went to the Spurs. Wemby finally has someone who will pass him the ball, unlike this.
Nani?
There's way too much news going on, but I'm not rushing these videos. We're giving you the truth and working hard to get you all the right info and have fun along the way. So please subscribe. The Clippers were the second highest paying luxury tax team, but they didn't care as much. It's why they re-signed James Harden to a 2-year, $70 million deal. Also, Batum and Mo Bamba, so on paper, they kinda mid in the West. This was not the only concern for the Warriors and Clippers. What pushed them over the edge is the same reason the Clippers weren't willing to add a 4th year to Paul George's contract, which ultimately ruined any chance of re-signing him. It was the next two tiers, the last tier being introduced last year in 2023. The first apron is sort of the first hard cap where restrictions really come into play. No sign and trade, can't take back more money in a trade, can't sign wave players over 12.2 million, and no using any trade exceptions that you may have accrued over time. This hurts if you're trying to build your team or add in-season additions. But the next tier is what struck fear in both the Clippers and Warriors. And another team that somehow everyone has forgotten about, but we'll get to that as the last point. The second apron was added to further restrict rosters, typically paying for multiple stars. You're not allowed to sign players using your mid-level exception, which was typically used on keeping veteran minimum players for their second year or getting extremely good role players willing to take a pay cut to play for a championship contender. Because most championship contenders are usually over the soft cap. Think Bruce Brown on the 2023 Nuggets, who was pretty crucial but only made $6 million that year. People thought Derrick Jones might sign an MLE to stay with the Mavericks, but he got more from the Clippers and went there. Your first round pick 7 years from now also gets frozen, so harder to trade for assets, and you can't aggregate players for a trade, meaning you can't trade 2 players for 1 even if the salaries all match up. Pretty much that means you're stuck with the squad if it doesn't work out. This has changed the confidence of teams offering bigger contracts. For example, the Mavericks trade that got them Kyrie Irving last year would not work this year because the Mavs were already at the second apron and wouldn't be allowed to aggregate trade. The Celtics did not care, but that wasn't the same with the Clippers and Warriors. The Clippers didn't want to offer PG a 4th year on his deal because that would mean that a majority of their cap space would be in players over 35 at that point, and they would be in the second apron unable to add roster pieces necessary to adjust for a team's needs with 2 injury-prone guys leading their roster. The Sixers have decided that it's fine since Maxey is only 23 and they really need the process to get something.
What happened?
Now, they are spending a lot to compete and they're okay with it. They re-signed Maxey to a 5-year, $204 million deal right after signing Paul George, so this core is set. Injured Embiid, Podcast P, Just No McCain, memes are gonna go crazy.
So the Podcast P presented to you by Prize Picks.
But Klay was a different story. For the entire year, the Warriors were unwilling to commit more money to Klay because they wanted to avoid luxury tax and be out of the second apron. To be in the running for the Paul George sweepstakes, the Warriors waived Chris Paul and kept Klay off their books so they would go under the aprons, allowing them to do a sign and trade. But the Warriors were also willing to offer PG the max, meaning they were willing to go into a luxury tax for Paul George. That would allow the Warriors to re-sign him over the soft cap. And that pissed off Klay, who had been hearing a different message for the year, an organization that he has done so much for. Draymond signed 1 year ago and had a bigger contract than what Klay was offered, so Klay felt slighted. And bam, you get Klay wanting out. The Warriors risked it, and the risk was that if they didn't get PG or sign Klay, they would still be over the soft salary cap and would only really have their MLE to get players. So now, they're stuck. They did get Buddy Hield, or some are calling another Splash Brother, Slow-Mo Kyle Anderson. They tried to cook the best they could. The Orlando Magic were in the running for both Klay and PG, keeping a lot of cap space open for this offseason, and instead got Caldwell Pope. That's tough. The Lakers weren't trying to entice Klay. LeBron was ready to take a pay cut, but that didn't happen, and he signed a 2-year, $105 million deal. And they're struggling to add anyone new to their roster besides their draft picks. Fun fact, did you know that Carmelo and Dwight Howard are still cap hits for the Lakers? That's hilarious. But the forgotten team I was talking about is the 3rd highest paying team in the league, a team that got swept in the first round, the Phoenix Suns. And they have kept a similar roster, re-signing players and replacing certain positions, but there was so much talk about Kevin Durant. How Durant was unhappy with his role, with the Suns, the roster, but they didn't really change much. Partly because a lot of contracts are set. KD, Booker, and Beal combined are owed $150 million this year, which is already over the soft cap. And overall, they are well above above the second apron, meaning again, unless they trade a big player for smaller pieces, they're stuck with a lot of restrictions and a lot of tax. The rest of the West hasn't stayed quiet. The Mavericks had to send Josh Green to the Hornets, lost Tim Hardaway Jr., but also got Quentin Grimes and Najee Marshall. This is a retooled Mavs that are better on paper. The OKC Thunder have also re-signed all their key role players and got rid of Josh Giddey, who just didn't fit. They got the Ball Mamba instead though, that's pretty hype. The Nuggets might have gone slightly worse, but kept their core three. Same with Timberwolves. I'm not mad at the Suns, I'm a believer of giving a team time to figure it out. Just wondering if we're gonna see even more drama, and knowing KD's recent history, we will. Technically, there are even more roster moves that have happened, these were the biggest. And to me, the second apron has changed how teams sign players just enough to impact the biggest moves of the offseason long before the offseason even started. And this rule change will continue to stop teams from recklessly spending a little more or force teams with multiple stars to stick more with the roster and build chemistry. I do think we need to have a talk about how teams are getting penalized for keeping their homegrown players like the Warriors, but that's for another day. This slight rule change has transformed the NBA. The all-day notification shout goes to LOL Theodore 1. Appreciate you. For some reason, players still don't like Steph Curry, and that's the one big thing next week. So see you next Saturday night at the minimum. It's your boy MJ. We out and we vibe.